Why is the government so involved
in our bedrooms?
In our bedrooms.
Yeah, they should not be in any capacity.
On the last leg of my journey to exploring sex and religion in the Wild West, I sit down with friends and colleagues to further discuss their views on sexuality, and the conversation turns to monogamy and same-sex marriage, the final frontier of this project. To really see how religious groups are controlling and manipulating our votes, I begin specifically with Proposition 8, a ballot initiative and a California state constitutional amendment passed in the November 2008 elections, which said that only marriage between a man and a woman is valid or recognized in California. All of these Mormons came out from Salt Lake City and basically set up camp in California, you know, call centers.
With very, very important, very specific genres. They focused on minorities and religions, Hispanic and Black, because they're typically more religious. So they actually did pointed, like, advertisements in newspapers, stickers, what's it called, just TV, and they did it specifically for that purpose, to try and get the minorities to come out against the minority.
How did a gay marriage ban pass in one of the most liberal states in the country as recently as 2008? Religious groups, such as the Latter-day Saints and the Catholic Church, financially backed and supported the proposition by taking to the streets.
If you have a bunch of Mormons coming in from Utah, and let's be honest, it was really a Mormon initiative. Mm-hmm. And they created this, and then you target a group of individuals who didn't even know what they were really signing, but they saw gay and marriage. You know, I don't know the percentage, but there was a healthy percentage of people who voted for it and didn't really know what they were voting for. Mm-hmm. But just went on the yes, 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 must be good, check the box.
Mm-hmm.
You know, backing up from same-sex marriage, just to be gay in the Mormon religion is a sin and totally wrong, and whatever the wording is, wicked in the eyes of God, mm-hmm. Sodom and Gomorrah, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. It was basically, from what I hear, a revelation from God to the prophet of the church, saying that they had to do something about it. Mm-hmm. So they sent busloads of people from Salt Lake City. They had call centers here. I know because I had relatives that were working in these call centers and putting up signs, and I mean, it was a huge thing.
Mm-hmm. And that was 2008 when Barack Obama was elected.
Yeah.
Furthermore, Proposition 8 was poorly written on purpose to confuse people and to look positive.
So the wording was completely backwards on the ballot. Mm-hmm. So it was asking, do you support the right to repeal gay marriage? So it was all positive factors and positive terminology on the ballot.
So
when it was actually taking away something that was there. So it was amazingly gross the way they did it, mm-hmm. in every capacity.
But the misleading ballot initiative for the strong religious only served to validate people's fears of what same-sex marriage might mean for them. A UCLA psychology study published in the journal Psychological Science in 2016 found that the leading reason people oppose same-sex marriage was because they believe gay men and women to be more sexually promiscuous than heterosexuals and are uncomfortable with casual sex. Thus, They feel threatened and afraid that the sexual promiscuity of the gay community would threaten their own marriages because it provides more temptations for spouses to cheat on one another.
It's so interesting the perspectives I get from the straight community. I had a discussion with my coworkers the other day. He was honestly kind of hurt and dismayed that we meaning gay individuals, would want to be married, because his ideal was, he grew up with it and it was such a straight / hetero ideal that gays being allowed to do it in a way cheapened it for him. It's going to hurt heterosexual marriage. It's going to affect it. It's not going to affect them having dinner or raising a child or anything like that, but it's shaking a core value that has been so taken for granted for them, but it's new for us. I think we just want to get to the point where it's taken for granted for everyone.
Yeah.
The big deal they have with it is ruining the institution of marriage, is what they say. That gay marriage is going to ruin the institution of marriage. But I don't understand it.
So we met online 7.5 years ago. But I always had this image of America as a first world country. And I grew up hearing, America, land of the free. Land of the free, pioneer of freedom. You can do whatever you want, like it's, there's total freedom everywhere. When I came to America, I kind of had that in my head of, oh, it's going to be just like the UK. Everyone, there's going to be gay marriage, everything's fine. I think I was very naive. As maybe I learned from Carl that was not the case, that you can't really hold hands in the street. You certainly couldn't kiss out in public.
It was almost like, I don't even want to try it, because if we're holding hands at this point, it's going to be an act of militance, and we're wanting to enjoy the afternoon. We don't want this to be a militant demonstration.
When somebody goes and starts dating and they plan marriage, they don't question the rights and the benefits, whereas it's a dual pronged for us. We are first and foremost want to commit to the one we love, but we also need the rights that go with it.
We all are here on this earth, we all pay taxes, we all do our part.
At its core, same-sex marriage is ultimately about equal rights. It's about visibility. It's about independence and freedom. It's about respect. But how would it affect the community, which for so long did not have mainstream role models? A community which had to fend for itself and make its own rules. A community which had to define its own ideals.
There's an extrapolation that everybody wants marriage, everybody wants monogamy, everybody wants these things. What we were fighting for were rights.
I know this from my friend that goes to church, who's very religious. He had said that they came to his pastor had said in church that if you were to vote for gays to get married in this state, we would lose our tax exemption because we wouldn't honor their marriages in our church. And that was going to all the churches within their parish, from what I understood. And so they were using a lot of scare tactics.
Anytime you kind of say this is what normal is, right? What you're talking about is this is what normative is. And normative and normal are two different things.
This is what we're told. You fall in love with that one person. You never look at another person. If somebody looks at them, they should be killed. One of those
that's
mentalities.
why everyone's cheating on each other.
I know.
Right? That's why infidelity is
That's it.
huge.
Exactly.
And dishonesty,
the divorce rate,
and divorce,
all of that.
Yeah.
Instead of just communicating.
The other argument that couples or monogamists have, and I'm not against monogamy if that's the structure that really works for you. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm not just okay with it. I'll applaud it. I'll celebrate it. I'll support it. I'll help you navigate it. But not when you believe that's where safety is. That's not where you believe that that's the only way to have an intimate relationship. Not when you use it to as a political statement against other kinds of relationship structures.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're telling me that your relationship to monogamy is not really your thing.
And for the gay community, a historically marginalized community, same-sex marriage represents equal rights, but not necessarily the other norms that go along with marriage, like monogamy.
Structure, till death do us apart, that we're borrowing, it hasn't worked for the heterosexual community. Right? I mean, we still have 50% divorce rates. Of those 50% that are left over, who's happy, who's not happy, who's having an affair, who's not having an affair. It creates an ideal that's very hard for anyone to live up to.
As a community that historically did not have the rights nor the luxury to legally marry, the gay community became well versed in non-monogamy and unabashed sexual expression.
What is the message that you're trying to preach?
The message that we're sending is very simple. America is doomed. This nation and soon this world's destruction is imminent.
In the dominant or heteronormative culture, rules, expectations, and ideals around sex and relationships are actually defined and upheld by laws like monogamy and marriage. I sometimes even tell my clients who are stuck in a rigid mindset to spend more time with their gay and lesbian friends to expose them to alternatives to the norm.
Yeah, you know, I go to gay bars, I go to transsexual bars, I go to drag queen parties, I go to swinger clubs, you know, anywhere I could openly express my femininity without feeling rejected or misunderstood, you know.
But these ideals and expectations around traditional marriage and monogamy don't always work. In my office, I often see couples running into the same set of problems: infidelity, lying, cheating, inability to talk and communicate about sex, keeping secrets from each other, wanting to be with other people, and confusion about their desires. Overwhelmingly, people know about infidelity, complain about the idea of sleeping with the same person forever, but when it comes down to it, people are still getting married and seeking couplehood.
There's like this fantasy that we're gonna live happily ever after,
which
with
is
the one, our soulmate, Mr. Right, or whatever. And there's not a lot of like education around it.
When people talk about monogamy, they talk about a set of ethics, right? And they assume that no other relationship structure has ethics. They assume that no other relationship structure is really intimate, and it's so not the case. Because these other relationship structures, if they're to work, require that much more communication, that much more openness, that much more honesty. And not just in terms of what I share with you, but how you receive what I share with you, right? If you shame me for my desire, that's the end of the conversation.
I think non-monogamy is more natural.
Okay.
I do. That doesn't mean that it's more culturally acceptable or more sort of natural or necessarily easy. I do think that we tend to use monogamy to feel more safe and to feel more stable and secure. And I want to talk first in the macro, and that is that we are not safe. We are not stable. There is no solid ground beneath us. We are on a rock that's spinning around in the midst of endless space. I think people want to grasp onto things to feel safe and to feel stable because they know somewhere deep inside that they're not. And so monogamy is one place where we can do that. We can say, this is my person, this is my life, this is what I believe, this is how it is. I am this solid entity, this person is part of that solid entity, I am safe. And that's why when someone cheats or when someone dies or when life things happen, it can feel like everything's falling apart, your identity's crumbling because you're so identified with this little thing you've created and believed to be real and solid.
They confuse the sex and sexuality with the marriage. With us, it's the love, the rights, the sex, it's everything. But for them, they're talking about, well, how can you have, they cling to the idea of gays with open relationships, or, don't ask, don't tell in a relationship. The variations of the sex aspect And they're like, well, how can you claim to want marriage, something so traditional, but you're still allowed to do this alternative sexual practices?
Mm-hmm.
So basically, like what you were saying, how can you have all of this good stuff and all this alternative and still want to be under the umbrella of our traditional marriage?
Right.
But I think that's a downfall as well, because yes, there is all this promiscuity. Yes, there is all this, you know, guys can go and do whatever all the time. But I think because they haven't had that core strength value of marriage or that commitment of any type, they can then do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And that's why it's hard to find good relationships. It's hard to find stable gay men to date.
Queer theory founder and activist Michael Warner, in his book The Trouble with Normal, argues that same-sex marriage should not be the sole goal for gay rights activism. Gay activists should work toward equal benefits for domestic partners and unconventional families as well. When national LGBT activists insist on the importance of marriage, it stigmatizes those people who choose other types of relationships within the gay community.
Do you personally feel affected by the whole Proposition 8?
I do.
Okay.
I do because I feel like at the time I didn't, because it's not something that I thought I was ever gonna do. Get married or find somebody that I love and just, you know, be that way. And so to me, I thought, oh, it would be nice to do it, but I didn't really know how it was gonna affect me. And now that it has, and now that I'm like, oh, we could get married and, you know, we could go to another, if we ever traveled and one of us got hurt, then it becomes that whole broken down barrier of, oh, he can't come in, he's not your family, you know, my family could sue him based on whatever I've already laid out if I don't have a goodwill. It just turns into this huge, I don't know, hassle almost, to where if that wasn't in place, it would just be the way things are.
Yeah, we're waiting to get married, but not because of that. It's just because we're not very organized.
Okay.
We're a domestic partnership already, so we have the rights in the state of California, but we don't have the the federal limits.
So how long have you guys been together?
It'll be 2 years in February.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a big step for both of us because we never thought we would be here, let's put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
We were very comfortable in our single lives.
You were wild and single.
Yeah, yeah. People kept saying, well, why do you want marriage? Why isn't a civil union enough? And the answer is, the United States is one of very few countries, if not the only one, that attaches all of the legal rights at the federal level to the definition in word marriage. Whereas we, the United States, when you get the marriage certificate and or walk down the aisle, the word marriage has 1,200 rights attached to it that gays and lesbians do not get.
Who grows up and is a little kid going, oh, I can't wait to get a civil union? No one says that.
Yeah.
No one.
It's true.
You know?
Basically, his take on what happens when we assimilate and try to become more and more like what we envision hetero people to be, in terms of we'll assimilate, we'll get married, we'll look just like a hetero couple.
Aping the majority.
Aping the majority, assimilating to the normative, not necessarily the normal, but assimilating to the normative. And as a result, it alienates a whole other subset of a community that don't necessarily believe in a monogamy or marriage. What happens is our creativity in terms of creating a relationship is taken out of the equation.
Now we have structure. The gay community has structure, where once it was kind of like there wasn't really a roadmap. They couldn't necessarily follow the same roadmap.
Well, not only could we not necessarily follow the same roadmap, at that time nobody was interested. When we talk about like sexual liberation, nobody was interested in roadmaps.
Right.
Ultimately, the fight for same-sex marriage is just the beginning to breaking down the rigid barriers that have been erected in our society by tradition, by religion, and upheld by tactics such as fear, shame, and ultimately criminalization.